Hard sports all plays. Hard sports all plays. Hard sports all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. Hard sport all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Hard sports all plays.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to ASAP in the Morning, the greatest morning show in all the land. It is March 17th, and we are so excited to be with you here today. Dustin, Stat Guy, how you doing today?
Doing great, Amon. It's great to have you on for another day. You should just stay on spring break for the rest of the year and call it quits.
Oh, man, I would love to stay on spring break for the rest of the year. Pride, we miss you here today, buddy. Wish we could have you on, but I'll do my best to kind of fill in your kind of shoes. But we know no one can really fill in Pride's shoes, right?
Pride's children told him to come on today.
Well, whatever madness Pride is going through, we're going to all experience some madness later today because March Madness is kicking off in the NCAA tournament. We have the first round kicking off today. A couple big-time matchups happening starting at around 12:15 should be the first game. So, Dustin, I want to ask you, which games are you watching, and then which games has the potential to break some brackets or some big upsets to occur?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Notre Dame for giving us March Madness last night with their double overtime win. So it's always good to get one of those games out of the way to kind of set the tone for the rest of the tournament. But I'm one of those people that watch pretty much every single game of March Madness if possible, especially the first couple rounds, just because that's when you have a lot of the upsets and everything like that. In terms of potential bracket busters today, there's really, I guess, not many that you could say are bracket busters. UNC Marquette game to me is very intriguing because I have actually North Carolina winning the round of 32 over Baylor. I believe is whoever they play, they play Baylor.
Yeah, if they win this one, they play
Baylor, so that would be more so of a bracket buster for me if they were to lose. Indiana, I could see upsetting St. Mary's, but I wouldn't consider it an upset when you look at how tough of a conference the Big Ten is as opposed to the conference that St. Mary's plays in. Murray State, San Francisco, to me, could be the most exciting game of the day because that could be like a 90-90 type game because both teams have terrific scoring offenses, terrific scoring backcourts, so they might just say, screw the defense, let's just go out and score as many points as possible. Murray State's kind of my bracket buster for the entire tournament because I do have Murray State in the Final Four, so we're going to kind of see how that translates today. But outside of that, I think today is kind of, I want to say it's a clear cut and dry day in my opinion where I don't see too many upsets that I can just pick out right now and say this team's going to win over this team. But obviously it's March Madness. We always have those upsets. But when you look at the slate of games today as opposed to the slate of games tomorrow, I think today is more of that clear cut day where you're going to see a lot more of the favorites win today as opposed to tomorrow.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cut and dry stuff. I think one game to me that kind of stands out, and I know Chris is going to like this, was Indiana and St. Mary. They go ahead and play today. And I actually picked Indiana to go ahead and beat. Or is it India playing St. Mary today, or are they playing?
Yeah, Indiana's playing St. Mary today.
St. Mary, right? So, yeah, I actually ended up picking Indiana to beat St. Mary. I don't know why in my bracket. There we go. Indiana, St. Mary. Yeah, so I have Indiana beating St. Mary, and I know St. Mary, they're a 5 seed, but Indiana has this kind of role that they've been on, and they played really well in the past couple of weeks. I know they had one tough loss to Iowa, but other than that, I thought they have played pretty decent basketball. I'm with you. Murray State's kind of my bracket buster. I know a lot of people have Kentucky in their Final Four, especially in the group I'm in, so I'm hoping that Murray State can come and win a couple games and break it up. I have them in my Final Four, Murray State, to go ahead and do that. I think North Carolina is, again, an interesting matchup because I could see them losing to Marquette. Because they're just sometimes they come out really flat, and when they're not playing with much emotion, they don't play good basketball at all. They kind of turn it over. They get lazy. They don't go to the post. They don't run that high pick and roll action that they're so good with. So if they get lazy, I can see Marquette jumping up there. I want to ask you your opinion on this game. Michigan, Colorado State. It's the most picked upset in the entire bracket, and I think that's kind of down to name factor. I think a lot of people within the bracket know Michigan to be a historically decent school when it comes to the basketball program. Do you see this game going Michigan's way, or do you think Colorado State kind of upsets the world, even though they're technically the 6th and Michigan is the 11th?
In my opinion, Michigan shouldn't even be in a tournament with a 17 and 14 record. And if they are in the tournament, they sure as heck should not be an 11 seed. Because if you look at teams like Texas A&M that went 24 and 9, and somehow they don't even get into the field, that's kind of a slap in the face to them, especially when you look at how much Michigan has struggled this year. I'm not going to say it's an upset if Michigan wins, just because they're from the Big Ten. They have the NCAA tournament pedigree where they have a ton of success. Juwan Howard, despite the issues that he's had this year as a coach, is still a terrific coach. And Colorado State's one of those teams that typically doesn't make the NCAA tournament that much, so this is kind of unfamiliar territory.
Right. Yeah, and it is.
Yeah, I do think that Colorado State can win this game, just because they do have the better team. They've played better than Michigan all year, but like I said, when you get to March Madness, it all comes down to experience. I picked Michigan to win this game, even though I don't think they deserve to be in the tournament as it is, but I did pick Michigan to win like a lot of people did. So if Colorado State wins, kudos to them, but I just think the physical style that Michigan plays is going to be too much for Colorado State because they don't have that physical style that they can match.
Yeah, and I think that's why I picked Michigan. I looked at it and I was like, I was really tempted to go Colorado State because I knew a lot of people would pick Michigan, but Michigan plays this physical style of basketball that I think once you get into the tournament, it's hard to match. You can score and play all this finesse style, but I think when it comes down to it, a lot of the times you see teams who are more physical end up dominating. I think, you look at it last year, right? Baylor just out-dominated, was it Gonzaga last year with Jalen Suggs? They just kind of out-bodied them in the national championship game. They just played a little bit better in that game because they could just get a little bit more physical. And I think that's sometimes what it comes down to. It's which team has just the most talent, has the bigger bodies. And yeah, you can get a pretty decent run going and, hitting threes and doing different things. But sometimes you just got to go square up, go man to man, and head down into the post. And in that respect, Michigan has the advantage. Again, Michigan 17 and 14. I don't know how they're an 11 seed. That was kind of a shock to me. But I
don't even know how they got in.
Yeah,
I don't even know how they got in.
And they could silence a lot of people like us too, saying how did Michigan get in if they could go on a quick run? But I think Colorado State's probably their only win here. I don't see them moving much past. And again, I think they just beat Colorado just because of that physical dominance that they have over Colorado State. And so we kind of talked about some of these upsets. Is there anything else on this bracket that I think could be a really interesting game? Maybe not an upset, but maybe a lot closer than people think this game could be. Is there any game that just stands out? It's like this could be really close, and not many people are expecting it to be close.
Obviously, you have to keep an eye on the 5-12 because the 5-12s are always kind of upset city. I think Richmond can give Iowa a heck of a game. I wouldn't be surprised if Richmond pulled that out. But the other game that I actually didn't talk about that I just checked today's schedule and kind of saw it, I actually picked Vermont to beat Arkansas, and that's a 4-13. I think Arkansas lost early in the tournament last year, I believe, and they lost to a team that plays a very similar style to what Vermont plays. Maybe Arkansas learned their lesson from last year to adjust. Maybe they haven't. But we've seen what Vermont can do come tournament time. Vermont is one of those teams that only make the NCAA tournaments by winning their conference tournament. But once they get into that field, they're tough out no matter who they play. They gave Syracuse a run for their money a couple years ago and actually knocked Syracuse off. Then they turned around and knocked Kansas off to actually get to the Sweet 16. So Vermont is one of those programs that if they do pick up a win or 2 wins in the NCAA tournament, it doesn't shock anybody because they've done it before. So if there was to be a big upset today, I think Vermont taking down Arkansas would be the big one of the day.
Yeah, and I looked at this one and I really thought about it because, like you said, Arkansas lost very early in the tournament last year, and Vermont has this kind of reputation for being a team that takes out a lot of favorites. I did pick Arkansas to win it, though. I do think there's something a little bit different about Arkansas this year compared to last year. I think they're a little bit more experienced, and I think they come in with that kind of drive to say, we're going to right the wrong. Kind of like what Virginia did when they lost as a number 1 seed. I don't think they quite finished the job, but I do think they kind of have that same idea or mindset of, okay, we got to say, look, this is not our program. We got to be a lot better than this. And I think they'll come out swinging against Vermont today. So while the madness is happening in college basketball, college hoops is not the only place it is occurring. we're gonna jump into baseball free agency. I know it's a little bit earlier than we usually jump into baseball, but we're gonna do it because there's a couple big moves yesterday, and I think we have a couple of guys who are a couple of teams that are emerging as favorites, and maybe one team in particular that a lot of people are really high on. Dustin, we saw the Toronto Blue Jays make a couple of big moves, and yesterday they add third baseman Matt Chapman to the roster. Does that move to you? I know to a lot of people it does. Does that make them the favorites to get to the World Series?
I think it does for now, but I also think a lot of that hinders on what happens with Carlos Correa. If Correa ends up re-upping and returning to Houston, then you have to put Houston above Toronto just because of how many times they've been to the World Series the last 5 years, how many times they've been to the ALCS, and they kind of still have that same core intact. So there's not a lot of changes that are becoming through that organization. Now, if Carlos Correa leaves, that does leave the American League a lot more wide open, and I do think Toronto at that point should be considered the favorite. You look at how they finished the year last year. I think they were like 41 and or like 48 and 20 over like their last 68 games. So they surprised a lot of teams last year. We know they have the offense that's going to slug you to death with George Springer, Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, and all these other young power hitting players that they have. You had a guy in Matt Chapman who's not only a perennial Gold Glove candidate, but he's going to hit 35 to 40 home runs in that park. You improved your starting pitching from last year after you lost your ace Robbie Ray. You go and get Kevin Gausman, who was a Cy Young candidate in the National League last year. You have a very strong bullpen. The team itself has a couple holes, but they're not really noticeable holes. Like you can pick the New York Yankees and say you're specifically missing starting rotation help, and you can pick the Houston and say you're missing this. Toronto's missing pieces, but you can't literally point out what pieces they're missing.
Yeah,
So
and
I think at this point they should be considered the favorites in the AL up until somebody says otherwise.
yeah, and I think you hit it too because you talk about this team. It's just the lineup. You look at it up to down. There isn't much wrong with it. They have all the pieces that you're looking for. And again, yes, it would be great to add a couple of things to the roster, but there isn't that thing that you say they desperately need, right? In the NFL, the example would be kind of what the Chargers are right now. There's nothing that they desperately need. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a couple of things, but they don't desperately need anything. Like go the Rams last year, they didn't desperately need anything, but it'd be nice to have Odell Beckham Jr. to have another receiver, right? So it was that kind of thing right now for the Toronto Blue Jays. And again, last year they come off of it so hot. They won 41 of their last like 64 or something like that. And I remember I was listening to this one guy talk about how he was in contact with some Boston Red Sox players. They were glad that they didn't have to see Toronto. Toronto didn't make the playoffs because they felt Toronto could have made some real noise last year. And again, you talk about improving the lineup. Yes, you lose Robbie Ray, but you go and get Dawson, who, like you said, Cy Young candidate out of the NL. You have an opportunity here to really make some noise here to be one of the better teams. And I know our very own Mike Hughes went out and put out a status today. He said, "Mark my words, the Toronto Blue Jays will win the World Series." So we'll see if Mike is right. But again, this team is primed and ready to go and make this kind of deep run.
And the sad part is they were in on Freddie Freeman and Kyle Schwarber also. Can you imagine what that lineup would have looked like had they added both of them or even one of them? They have a lineup right now that's going to hit 250 to 300 home runs. You pencil in another one of those guys, you're pushing 400 home runs with that lineup.
That would have just been unreal. And as you mentioned, Freddie Freeman did get himself a contract, but it was with the Los Angeles Dodgers, a 6-year, $162 million deal. So, Dustin, do you like this move for the Dodgers? Do you think it helps them out in a big way? Or yeah, tell me about it.
I don't like the move for the Dodgers because why did they need to make it?
Okay.
They literally did not need to make this move because if you look at that lineup top to bottom, they have the best lineup in baseball. You have Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, you have Will Smith, you have Max Muncy, you have Gavin Lux, Justin Turner, Trey Turner. Like, they're one of those teams that doesn't care how far over the luxury tax goes. They're one of those teams that doesn't need to sign all these people, but they want to. They're one of those teams that just wants to show how much money they have and that they can spend it. And adding Freddie Freeman to this lineup basically replaces Corey Seager's left-handed bat. But Freeman's a better left-handed bat than Corey Seager. Dodgers have been the favorites in the National League for the last 6 or 7 years, every single year, and Granted, some years they make it World Series, some years they don't, but after this edition, they're going to be the favorites in the National League. You have to stay for another 5 years because that says that long-term extension. Bellinger's going to get extended. You got Freeman now for 6 years. You know a lot of that pitching staff is under simple contracts where they're going to have them under team control for another 3-4 years. So you've got to think the Dodgers are the favorites for like another 4 or 5 years at this point.
Yeah, and you have to consider because the roster is just that good, right? And Damian comes in here. Dodgers are gonna suck like always. Well,
If you
sometimes
call, if you call 104 wins sucking, I would take it any day of the week.
uh, I think it's the playoff success that maybe Damian is looking for. And again, they did win a World Series in recent memory. I think the move again it's just adding flame to the fire. It's like when Kansas City goes and gets a receiver. It's like why you do that? Why do you have to go and do that? You already have plenty of them, and that's just kind of what it felt. It felt they're just getting another guy who can come in there, and if one of their big hitters are already not firing, okay, we got one more we can just throw in there. So I think Dustin, you don't like it just because it's taken away from your side, maybe. I felt a little salt in that kind of comment there. Maybe.
I don't. It's not that I don't respect the Dodgers. Because to me, the Dodgers are like the New England Patriots. It's football, and the Patriots kind of got on that 2-decade long run where no matter what they did, they always won. But the Patriots did it different ways. The Patriots had Tom Brady, and they had a bunch of players that were starting caliber players, but they weren't all stars, and it was just the system that Belichick put in place. The Dodgers are literally acquiring every possible all-star that you can put together and just trying to build a super team. And they're trying to do this every single year, and it works to get them to the playoffs, but it doesn't always work to win a championship. I'm just getting to the point now where why do you keep needing to do this when you're getting to the World Series with what you have? You're getting to the World Series with the farm system you built, with the trades you made and all this. If you shouldn't have to continue to sign all these people, basically ruin the free agent market for everybody else because you were spending X amount of dollars on Freddie Freeman, where guess what? The next first baseman is going to want Freddie Freeman money. You're probably not going to get it because you set the bar on what you signed him for.
Yeah, and for them, it's like we have the money to spend, we're gonna spend. And I hear your point here. They kind of pulling what the Jacksonville Jaguars did with Christian Kirk, right? They're kind of ruining the market for a lot of other teams, and the Dodgers, they have the luxury to do that because they're in LA. They got a lot of money, and to their credit, they go and they get to the World Series. They're one of these brands in baseball that even if you're just a casual fan, you recognize the Dodgers more so than you'll recognize maybe the Colorado Rockies or another team like that. But we'll talk about the Rockies and their signing later. But that they just have that kind of luxury to do that. And I see your point. They just keep setting the bar too high and screwing over other teams. But you know what? The Dodgers, they have the ability to do that. So good for them. You know what I mean? Like if you can do it, go ahead and do it. We'll see if this can finally get them over the hump in the World Series, get them back to the top of the world, or if this will just be another one of these signings that lead them back to the same spot and never get them past that at all. We talked about the Colorado Rockies, just brought him up. Chris Bryant signs a 7-year deal worth $182 million with the Colorado Rockies. Dustin, already shaking your head. Tell me why.
That 7-year, $200 million deal the Cubs gave you 4 years ago is looking pretty nice now, isn't it? He declined a 7-year, $200 million deal with the Cubs 4 years ago because he wanted to bet on himself. And I think a lot of why he declined that deal in the first place was because of the whole arbitration process and how the Cubs kind of handled his situation. And you could tell kind of from day one that it rubbed him the wrong way. And I think from that moment forward, he was kind of like, well, I'm going to finish this contract up and I have no desire to come back. Granted, his numbers haven't been the MVP numbers since his MVP season, but he's still a very good hitter. He's still going to get you 30 home runs, and he's a guy that can play 5-6 positions on the field. I'm surprised that he went to Colorado, in my opinion, knowing that Colorado is at least 2 or 3 years away from playoff contention. And you put Chris Bryant in Coors Field for 81 games. You're going to get 20 to 25 home runs out of him just at home alone, plus what he adds to you on the road. He's going to be an MVP candidate again because his numbers are going to be so inflated at Coors Field. But he's also shown that he can be a complete hitter everywhere else, so at least he's going to be not suffering from the Trevor Story or the Nolan Arenado effect where they were so used to hitting at Coors Field, they couldn't hit away from Coors Field. Right. Bryant's had 7 years where he's been able to hit other places, and now he's going to this place, so he'll just be able to build off of what he's done so far.
And I think the kind of irony of it is he's going to he's gonna play so well. He's gonna have that kind of season where it's almost gonna be like he's gonna be worth the $200 million. You know what I mean? He's gonna be
Mhm.
worth more than his contract is because, like you said, in Ford Field, it's not hard to hit there. If you can hit anywhere else, you can hit at Ford Field. That's just the rule and the thing of the trade. And again, he got traded from Chicago to San Francisco last July, and he goes and signs with the Colorado
I'm
Rockies. And again,
surprised he didn't stay in San Francisco, honestly.
you're surprised he didn't try to stay?
Mhm.
Why so?
He's a West Coast guy.
Yeah.
He was born in Las Vegas. He went to college in San Diego. It just made sense for him to stay out west of San Francisco. And the other team I thought he would go to is Philadelphia to join Bryce Harper because those two have been best friends since high school. They've been talking about playing together for years. Philadelphia is a lot closer to making the playoffs than the Rockies are. That's why the whole him going to the Rockies, when I heard them being mentioned over a lot of these other teams, I shook my head right away and I said, why the Rockies? Like, what do they have that none of these other teams have? So him going to Colorado surprises me a lot. But at least he's staying out west. He's still staying close to where he grew up. Obviously, Vegas is pretty close to Denver, so at least he's staying out west. But I'm just surprised he didn't stay with San Francisco, knowing the position that they're in.
Yeah, and Damien, we're in the same boat as you. Why Colorado? Again, there's really not a reason that we can think of besides, you're going to put up numbers in Colorado. That's really the only thing. Maybe they're the only team to give you 182 because they're not close to a championship team yet. They still have a couple of years and still a couple of big pieces away from it. So we'll see what they can do with it. Again, Chris Bryant, I think we all are in agreement that he's a very good player and he's going to put up numbers over there in Colorado. But I think we're all very much surprised that he didn't try to go to a team where they have a little bit more opportunity to win. Or, like you said, Philly would have made a lot of sense. You go reunite with one of your hometown buddies, and y'all can just. And if you play those two together, that's a pretty decent duo to have. And the Phillies team, again, they're not great, but they can continue to build off of what they have in Bryce Harper. If you can add Chris Bryant to that, you're taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised he didn't go there because you'd had Bryce Harper, Chris Bryant, and Kyle Schwarber
Yeah,
as the 3, 4, 5 hitters in that lineup. And outside of Toronto, I'd like you to find another lineup that has a better 3, 4, 5 punch in the middle of the lineup than what you could have had.
yeah. And Kyle Schwarber, like we said yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday he
Yeah.
made the move to go to the Phillies, and I think he kind of broke Pride's heart just a little bit.
Well,
Just a little bit.
he broke my heart too. 'Cause I was hoping the Cubs would have hit him and try to bring him back to be the DH. But hey,
Well, we will continue to track baseball free agency and see what it makes of it. If Mike comes
but
back on, we're going to.
did you see the thing they showed the other day though? When it comes to Schwarber, Bryan, Rizzo, and Bauer,
What
the
happened?
4 players that the Cubs got rid of like the last couple of years,
Yes.
the Cubs offered them more money than what they all signed for. So that goes
Wow.
to show you where their market has gone since they turned down those extensions.
Yeah.
Had those 4 players signed the extension that the Cubs gave them, they would have been on the books for $570 million. And
Wow.
combined right now, they signed for $493 million. So the Cubs basically saved $80 million by not bringing those 4 back. But that shows you that when they were getting those extensions, just before they started to hit their kind of struggles in the decline, and their market is really taking a hit because of it. And you can ask Javier Baez; he admits that he should have taken the extension. You can ask Chris Bryant; he admits that he should have taken that extension. They all admit that they should have taken it when they were given it. They just tried to bank on themselves, and it didn't work.
So, as a Cubs fan, are you glad that they ended up not taking those extensions because of the money the Cubs saved, or?
Yes and no. There's a couple of them, like Chris Bryant, I was okay with leaving just because he threw a fit over something that every team does. Yes, the arbitration process is flawed, where if you keep a player down for 2 weeks, you get that extra year of control. But any team's going to do that with a talent like this guy. So he had no business getting upset about it. And you could see the writing on the wall from day one that he wasn't going to return because of that. So I was okay with him leaving. As much as I love Anthony Rizzo, I was okay with him leaving just because he's going to be 33 this year. He has a chronic bad back that always flares up, and at some point you have to think that he's going to need surgery on that back and this extended periods of time. Schwarber, I was Schwarber leaving when he did was okay just because he deserved to leave, but I was hoping the Cubs would bring him back just because he's a left-handed power hitter, which they do not have. The one that I miss the most is Javier Baez. And it's not because of the strikeouts. It's not because of everything else. It's what he does. He makes great defensive plays. He's a wizard on the bases. Yes, he strikes out a ton, but he's also going to make you pay with pitches that a lot of hitters can't get to. And he was the face of that franchise the last couple of years, and now that he's gone, the Cubs don't have a shortstop. They don't have Correa. You can't trust Nico Horner to stay healthy. You have Andrelton Simmons, who's a defensive wizard, but can't hit his weight at the plate. So you kind of put yourself in a bigger hole by letting Baez go because now what's your asset shortstop?
Yeah, and that's a great perspective to have. I think I was really curious when you brought that up to be like, all right, because these are players who are good, right? They performed for Chicago, and but I was gonna wonder, were you okay with letting them walk and saving that $80 million, or would you? I think you answered it. You'd rather have Javi back, and
Because if he signed for 130 with the Twins, and the Cubs
Right.
offered him, I think 5 at 175 or 6 at 175, whatever it was, they could have got him less for 175. They could have got him probably 6 for 150, 6 for 140. Like they could have got him for more than what Detroit got him for, but they still could have got him less than that 175 that he turned down. He still saved the team money, and he's only 28. So you're going to have him for his entire prime, and then when he gets to the end of that contract, then you can decide what you're going to do.
Well, again, baseball free agency is live and wild, and will continue to. Damien comes in here. Y'all can have Vinny Velasquez. Please take him. There's an unhappy fan there. But again, we will see how baseball free agency continues to work out. There's something interesting as we jump into the NFL and that whole free agency bracket. The Saints, they were so far over the cap, so far, and no, because now they're 29.2 million below the cap. And I'm sitting here, and they said they restructured deals from a lot of guys. But you talk about the guys they've restructured. Here's the report. They restructured the contracts of quarterback Taysom Hill, Bradley Roby, corner, linebacker Demario Davis, and safety Malcolm Jenkins. I still am wondering how you are that far over the cap and end up with enough money to go get Deshaun Watson. And Scott Zolak put it perfectly. He's a former Patriots quarterback and the current Patriots color commentator. He goes, the Saint, he talked about the Saints pretty good. He says the cap is crap, because that blew my mind. Because now they have money to go get Deshaun Watson.
I mean, you could say the same. You could make the same argument about Green Bay.
Yeah.
How did they go from $50 or $48 million over the cap to somehow being able to afford Aaron Rodgers for $50 million, somehow being able to re-sign Preston Smith for this and re-sign this person for this, and now I think they're like $18 million under the cap right now. And I don't know how the cap works. I mean, I know you can restructure all these deals, but you mean to tell me that just restructuring a couple people just literally opened up $50 or $60 million for this year to somehow get you under the cap? I've never known how the NFL works in terms of the salary cap situation, because when teams in the NBA are over the cap, you see cuts happen. You don't see restructures.
Yeah.
When teams in the NHL are over the cap, you see cuts. You don't see restructures. Obviously, baseball, you don't have to worry about that because they don't have the cap. But I don't understand how you can just pick and choose who you're going to restructure and somehow all of a sudden clear $90 million off the books because you decided to move money from year 1 of the contract to year 3 of the contract and vice versa.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Is like, okay, does that not affect the cap?
It's like a credit system. Like, hey, we are $60 million over a cap right now, but can I push that $60 million like 3 years down the line just so I have money to spend right now?
It really didn't just make sense. And I get the Rodgers thing because I know his contract value came down. Like he's on the books for only $28.9 million this year, versus the 42 that he was supposed to be scheduled for. So that was a huge, and that was just honestly shocking to me that he was willing to do that. Because that doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers' brand, but
I think he did that. I think he did that for Devontae Adams, but now with the Devontae Adams situation, you have to wonder if Rodgers is regretting taking that discounted issue.
Because I still don't find a way that they are going to pay him $30 million, and I
I
feel
don't think there's a way any team does.
No, but I don't think any team will have to. I think that we talked about in the chat the other day. I think with Devontae Adams, I think it's for the Packers. You pay me $30 million. Any other team, I'm okay with 23. Right? I think no one's getting away with paying him less than $23 million. But for the Packers, he says, y'all franchise tag me once. Y'all franchise tag me twice. You try to make me play the whole year like this. Okay, give me 30 if Christian Kirk gets 21. I feel it's kind of like a giant FU back to the Packers.
That's what I told my uncle, and that's what I told a lot of people last week. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers was the guy that you wanted to keep long term, but he was still under contract this year. Your primary focus should have been getting Devontae Adams locked in long term, getting that figured out first, and then worrying about Aaron Rodgers. Because Aaron Rodgers said he was not going to play for a rebuild. If he sees you extending Devontae Adams long term, that's going to show him that you want to commit to winning long term, and he'd be more than willing to take the extension. You screwed up by signing him to his extension first. And now you're left there wondering if you can even get Adams back because of the situation that's going on with him.
Absolutely, and honestly, I can't even blame Devontae because it feels like a monster of the Packers' own creation. In the sense, like they kept dealing, and I think you've brought this up before. They kept dealing with Aaron Rodgers' tantrums. They kept dealing with, Kirk Cousins makes more money than me. I need money, and they just gave it.
It rubbed off on the rest of the team.
Yeah, and again, people always wonder how does Tom Brady teams get guys to take pay cuts? Well, it's because Tom Brady takes pay cuts. It's because he's not saying
he's not a crybaby either.
There you go. And again, Kirk Cousins is making 35. He said, okay, I'm good with 25. I don't need to be the highest paid. Just make sure we got a team. Make sure we can win. For Aaron Rodgers, it's, Kirk Cousins making 35. I need 40. Oh, this guy's making 45. I need 50. And that's kind of the mold he set in. For Devontae Adams, again, this is a kid who hasn't gotten a contract yet. He hasn't seen money yet, real money yet. And again, he's had the $19 million on the franchise tag, but we don't consider the franchise tag to be any security. It's a 1-year deal. So now he's got opportunity to make sure he established himself as a money guy and establish this contract. So yeah, he's going to take a little bit of, Aaron Rodgers cried about it, so I can cry about it. And you guys try to franchise tag me not once, but twice, and try to underpay me. All right, give me 30. I think this is really just a product of all the things the Packers have done since Devontae has got in the building. And to be honest, as someone who is just kind of laughing at the Packers, I'm going to continue to laugh at them.
Yeah, well, I'm just waiting for 2 years down the line when they can't sign anybody because they moved all this money from now until 2 years down the line.
Yeah, no, and that's what's going to happen. And if they give Devontae money, they're going to keep cutting. Again, they cut Zadarius Smith. Watch them have to cut Preston Smith, the guy they just give all the money to. Yeah, they really are in a situation where...
And right there, what you just said, does that make any sense? Like, Preston Smith was supposed to make $15.2 million, so you cut. But then you extend Zadarius. You cut him, and he was supposed to make $15.2 million. Then you go and sign Preston Smith, and he's making $14.8 million. So all the money that you just freed up by cutting Smith, you just gave right back to Preston Smith. So essentially, you didn't even move any money. You literally just cut one guy just to pay another guy the same thing.
And that was because I think we were all in agreement. They cut Zadarius Smith to try to pay Devontae. But no, they said, no, we're going to go pay Preston Smith. And this is the issue now. With the money that Rodgers is making, with the money Devontae Adams is demanding, there's no way you can surround yourself with anybody. Could you imagine this Packers team had the money to go get J.C. Jackson and put him on that defense across the field from the other corner? Like that's a defense that's real. That's a defensive backfield that's real. But guess what? You don't have the money, and Packers fans are going to complain come January, well, we don't have a defense. Let me think about it. There's a cap, right? This isn't baseball. There's a cap. And you don't have the money. I'm shocked. I'm shocked at where the money went.
Right.
But that wasn't the only move and the only thing that happened yesterday. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills, because they made a big money contract. They gave Von Miller, the 32-year-old Von Miller, 6 years, $120 million. This is top tier pass rusher money they're giving to a 32-year-old. Now he is a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Dustin, how do you feel about this move from Buffalo? Do you think they overpaid?
I'm good with the 6 years, but the $120 million, I think they overpaid. The only way that I can see it working is if you front load that contract where you give them more money the first 3 years, and then the rest of the contract, the money trades off. Which I don't know how that contract is detailed at this point, but if they front loaded the contract where he gets more than money up front, then I'm okay with it. The $120 million to a 32-year-old pass rusher is going to be the biggest question if he even lasts 6 years in the league. He can finish out that contract, or is he going to finish to retire before the contract is over? In terms of the pickup itself, it probably makes Buffalo the team to beat the AFC. I know that's going to hurt Greg's feelings and get Greg all upset just because Kansas City is still Kansas City, but Kansas City lost Tyrann Mathieu to the Buccaneers. That was one of their glue guys on defense that they needed to bring back. Yes, they brought back, or yes, they brought in Justin Reed to play safety, but he's not Tyrann Matthew. And we've already seen how much better the AFC West got. So Kansas City's not going to have an easy road just to get out of the West, but it's Buffalo's division to win in the AFC East. And it has been the last several years, and it's going to be for the foreseeable future as long as Josh Allen is there. They had the number one overall defense last year, and now they added to that by bringing Von Miller in. So you have to think that this team is now the team to beat in the AFC because of this addition, because it makes that defense that much better.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. This is a great move in terms of the personnel you brought in because Sean McDermott, he loves his pass rushers. He loves his defense, and he's a defensive guy dating all the way back to his time in Carolina as a defensive coordinator. And the Bills kind of came in left field and just kind of stole him from the Rams and the Cowboys. Or those are the two teams that are really in talks. I know the Broncos were there for a little bit. Here is what we have so far in the Von Miller contract. So it's $120 million max value and has a $53 million payout in his first 3 years. So like you said, they kind of front loaded the deal, and $32 million of it is guaranteed at signing, and there's $52 million in total guarantees. So they're really paying, over $75 million just through the first 3 years. When you talk about $32 million fully guaranteed and the $53 million payout in the first 3 years. So there's, 75 of the 120 coming out for the first 3 years, which makes sense. Andre, yes, I think it's a great fit. I think absolutely it's a great fit because I think last year they kind of struggled getting to the passer. I think while they could get there with coverage time, they just didn't get there outright. You didn't have that tremendous pass rusher, the guy who can come off the edge hot. And while Von Miller might not be what he once was in Denver, what he's going to attract is double teams. And that's going to mean you're going to get singled up for a lot of other guys. You're going to create mismatches for people. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a guy who can demand a double team and sometimes win off the double team and other times just create opportunities for others. Again, when you talk about Buffalo, you talk about our team that's the best in the AFC East. They still have all the pieces there. They made another signing, which we'll talk about. But defensively, now they can get after the quarterbacks. And in this AFC now, you have to get after the quarterback. You have to get after Joe Burrow. You have to get after Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Derek Carr, Lamar Jackson. You have to get after all these guys. And Von Miller is just a guy that can create those opportunities to do so. Well, Buffalo didn't stop just with Von Miller. Earlier that day, they did bring in the former Bucs tight end, O.J. Howard on a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million. I think the base value is $3.5 million. What'd you make of that move, Dustin?
I mean, you pair him with Dawson Knox. That's going to be a nice double tight end threat. You still got Stephon Diggs. But the question is, Cole Beasley's not there anymore. He's a free agent. He hasn't resigned. I don't know if Emmanuel Sanders is back or if he's a free agent. So you are losing something in the passing game, so at least O.J. Howard can come in and at least give you a red zone presence. He's not going to be a big-time playmaker because Dawson Knox is still going to be that primary tight end target. But, I mean, the more weapons you give Josh Allen, the better it's going to be because we've already seen how bad Buffalo's running game is because Josh Allen is their running game with when your quarterback is, Lamar Jackson's the Ravens running game too, but when Josh Allen is your running game, it's not necessarily a bad thing because he's a runaway freight train when he gets going, so it's not like the beating that he takes is going to affect him. But the more weapons you give him in that passing game, the more diverse and dynamic he's going to be because teams aren't going to be able to blitz 6 guys on him. They're going to have to blitz 3 and drop 8 in coverage. And if you drop 8 in coverage, they'll just tuck it and run it for 10, 12 yards. Then if you want to try to blitz 6, blitz 7, and put guys in single coverage, not too many guys can guard Stephon Diggs in single coverage. There's not a lot of linebackers that can guard Dawson Knox in single coverage, and O.J. Howard is a matchup nightmare also, so Allen would be able to pick you apart through the air. So signings like this are what takes elite quarterbacks, and I consider Josh Allen an elite quarterback. There's only 3 quarterbacks that I consider elite right now in the NFL, and Josh Allen is one of those 3. It takes him and puts him at a different level, just because now he's going to be able to maximize that arm talent even more because he has another weapon to throw.
Yeah, and I kind of looked at it like this, too. You talk about the running game of Buffalo. It was pretty much non-existent outside of Josh Allen. O.J. Howard's a good blocker. Like, he was able to block well in Tampa. That's one of the only things he was really able to do when he was down in Tampa. Didn't have a lot of success in the passing game. They relied more on Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate. So now you get a guy who can come in and block. And you can run a lot more 2 tight end sets and create different mismatches with Stephon Diggs, make some personnel issues for the opposing defenses, right? Do they play an extra safety? Do they play the linebacker? And also, I think it gives you another guy who can kind of be your middle of the field option, like a Travis Kelsey type of deal where, Mahomes, a lot of the times, he's got guys running just deep down the field, 20, 30 yards. And it's just Travis Kelsey working that middle of the field, underneath intermediate. And that's what I think you can use Dawson Knox and OJ Howard for. You can slip them out the backfield. You can slip them out off the offensive line. Just have them work that middle of the field when Stephon Diggs is not great down the field. And I thought that was a big adjustment they made later in the later part of the season last year was they started hitting underneath throws. Okay, running back there on the check down. Let me hit him. Dawson Knox is here at this flat. Let me hit him versus trying to continuously push the ball down the field. Now you have to give another option that can, just chunk and nickel and dime your way down the field, which is, again, not sexy, but it's how you win. When things are not open down the field, you don't force it, you just nickel and dime it down. And that's what you can do here with OJ Howard.
The worst case scenario too, what you said, you can nickel and dime it to death. But if you go back to that playoff game against Kansas City, you still have Josh Allen who can throw a ball 80 yards on the fly and just have Gabby Davis run under it if he needs to.
Yeah, again, they make all these plays happen. And again, this gives you another opportunity to run more play action. I think play action, if you can set up a play action game in Buffalo, it's going to be so dangerous because, again, you talk about Gabriel Davis, you talk about Stephon Diggs, you talk about that arm of Josh Allen. If you can get safeties and linebackers to sink to the line of scrimmage because you have an actual running game, because you have an actual blocking scheme, now you create that plays down the field. And if those aren't there, okay, I'm just going to slip my tight end out into the flat and I can hit him. I can also keep him in there to give me some extra time to block. This gives you options. And I think you're going to see a lot more of two tight ends in Buffalo. I think a lot of the times they would just spread everyone out because they knew they couldn't run the ball anyway. So they said, screw it, we're spreading everything out. Now you put two tight ends in there. At least you give the threat if you have a back behind him. Okay, we can take off and run the football, which, again, if you're going to be a good football team, you have these different levels, these different threats. And that's what I think OJ Howard brings in this two tight end system.
And you being a Patriots fan, obviously watching the AFC more than I do because I'm a Minnesota fan, but this, to me, makes Buffalo a better offense than Kansas City. And the only reason why I'll say that is when Kansas City struggled, you can go back to the Super Bowl loss against Tampa. Teams started to play that single high safety on Kansas City, which kind of takes away the deep ball throw to Tyreek Hill because you have that safety over the top. And teams also knew that Kansas City did not have a great running game, so you could get away with playing that single high safety. You cannot play a single high safety on Buffalo because you have that Josh Allen presence of running, and now that you have this double tight end set, you play that single high safety, you're opening the middle of the field for guys like Dawson Knox and OJ Howard, where you can get 15 to 20 yard gains over the middle because you have that single high safety back. The moment you bring that safety back down to play your regular two safety set, that's when Josh Allen's going to beat you with his arm. So now teams are going to have to figure out, well, we can't play single high safety. We can't play a straight up man-to-man safety. Like, do we play zone? Do we play prevent? Like, how do we stop this Buffalo offense? Because now they can do the things that they weren't doing well at last year. And if they start doing that well, it's going to make the things they did well that much better.
Yeah, and, you talked about it. What Kansas City struggles to do is adjust. I think they have the ability to do the same type of thing of, they're playing single high. Let's just hit Kelsey in the middle. Let's hit this guy in the middle, that guy in the middle. And they could do that. But the issue is they lack that adjustment ability. And I think what I saw to Buffalo from, the year where they lost in the AFC Championship game to the year they lost in the divisional last year was that adjustment period of we can just check it down. And that's what I really like from Buffalo. I saw that adjustment. And why, I think that this offense can be more in tune to win because when things aren't going well down the field, they didn't fall apart last year. When things aren't going well down the field for Kansas City, they break, they fold, they don't really have that adjustment. And again, we'll see if they start to do it with the short game because they have all these quick receivers. But when you have that kind of big arm quarterback, you tend to say, I'm gonna just let him throw me out of a situation. Buffalo, I think Sean McDermott realized, hey, just check it down. Just do this. And I think Brian Dable was a big part of that. Now, no more Brian Dable in Buffalo. But again, that adjustment was already made. I think Buffalo's offense is more well-rounded right now than Kansas City's just because, again, that willingness to adjust and that ability to adjust, I've seen it from Buffalo. I'm yet to see it from KC.
If you look at the playoff game last year against Kansas City was going with that single high safety against Buffalo in the first half. And Buffalo's offense was off to a slow start because they couldn't get the running game down. The moment that Josh Allen started to get his legs moving, You saw that single high safety come down, and then look what Josh Allen did in the second half. Because now not only did you have to account for Josh Allen, but Kansas City secondary wasn't good enough to guard Stephon Diggs one on one. They weren't good enough to guard Davis one on one, and Allen's got the arm that he can just overthrow everybody anyway. So that's kind of what you were talking about with the adjustments. You can play single high safety against Buffalo if you want, but at some point you're going to have to get out of that because if Josh Allen starts moving the ball with his legs, that's going to create a problem also.
Exactly. And like you said, Kansas City's secondary is not getting any better. They got much worse. You lose Tre'Davious Ward, your best corner. You lose Tyrann Mathieu. Yeah, you replace him with Justin Reed, and I don't think Justin Reed is a bum, but he's not Tyrann Mathieu in that system. You're going to see a lot more Daniel Sorensen at safety, and if you're a Chiefs fan, you know that is not what you want. You don't want to see that kid at safety. So you lose your best corner, you lose your best safety. The defense isn't getting better. The defense just didn't get better. And if you can go and sign Juju Smith-Schuster, but at some point you got to make a stop, and you're not going to.
Exactly. They need to just revamp that defense, and it's the only way that I think they can do it is in the draft. I don't think they're going to be able to do it in free agency because I think they're going to try to get a guy like Allen Robinson or a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster to pair with Tyreek Hill in free agency. So they're going to fix the defense. They have to do it in the draft, and they have to fix. They can't hope to hit. They need to hit on whoever they take so that defense can improve.
And to me, that was really the shocking thing of why when they let Tre'Davious Ward walk was they do so well drafting receivers. I've never seen Andy Reid really miss on a receiver. He might not be a stud, but if he's your number 3, they always kind of work out. But you can see him whiff on defensive guys. I would have said you already have that guy in the building. Why not pay him and say, okay, we can go draft another Juju Smith-Schuster instead of paying that Juju Smith-Schuster. Again, they haven't come to a contract yet, but that's the expected thing. Again, to me, it just made more sense to go and get your defensive piece when you struggle finding those guys rather than try to get a piece that you are really good at getting in the draft.
And what you just said about Andy Reid missing on defensive players, Steve Spagnuolo is the defensive coordinator. He's supposedly one of the 5 best defensive coordinators of all time, and wherever he's gone outside of this year in Kansas City, his defenses have been top 10. Why isn't he the one drafting the defensive players? Because typically he works well with it, does wonders with the defense, and typically he doesn't miss. So why not let him? If you have a defensive player you're interested in, let him make the decision on who you're going to draft. Because if he does what he does and hits on who he's going to draft, and then Andy Reid does what he does and hits on the receivers and hits on who he's going to hit offensively, then your team's in a better position. It's the fact that you have a head coach that is so offensive minded than Andy Reid that I'm not going to say he only understands offense because obviously he understands the whole game of football, but when it comes to prospects and developing, he only focuses on the offensive side. He doesn't necessarily worry about the defensive side as much as he should.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what that AFC has in store. But there was another move that I do want to talk about. Chris Godwin, Tampa Bay Buccaneers receiver, was given a 3-year, $60 million deal. They had to rework their current receiver, Mike Evans' deal for the cap space to do it, and they did that. And now Chris Godwin has gotten his extension. I want to ask you, Dustin, do you think how quickly the turnaround from him getting tagged to the contract, did the Devontae Adams situation had anything to do with it, you think?
Yes. Godwin played on the franchise tag last year, and knowing that Adams did also, and then seeing what Adams is now doing, Tampa Bay could not afford to go through a similar situation with Godwin, especially now that Tom Brady decided to come back. They needed to make sure Godwin was locked up at least for an additional 2 years if he got to guarantee that he's still with Tom Brady for 3 years. But again, that hurts the Packers because Christian Kirk's getting $21 million or $22 million a year. Now you got Godwin, who, in my opinion, he's not worth $20 million. He's only worth $20 million because of who his quarterback is. So now that Godwin got what he got, the price tag on Adams is going up. It just is. And the Packers, I think, are finally starting to realize that, okay, I'm the minority on this just because I think watching the Packers as long as I've watched the Packers because I have no choice. Living in Wisconsin, I really don't have a choice. But I don't think Adams is a top 5 receiver. Everybody else says he's a top 3 receiver. Everyone else says he's a top 2 receiver. The reason why I say what I say is look at Greg Jennings, look at James Jones, and look at Jordy Nelson. Look at how good Jennings. Jordy Nelson I can't really use because he left Green Bay towards the end of his career, same thing with James Jones. But look at how good Greg Jennings was with the Packers and how good he was with Aaron Rodgers. The moment he signs a 4-year, $48 million contract with Minnesota, he went from looking like an all-pro number one wide receiver to looking like a number two receiver at that, if not a number three receiver, because the quarterback play in Minnesota was not what it was in Green Bay. I'm not saying Devontae Adams is going to follow a similar trend, but if you go from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr, Derek Carr's not at the same level as Aaron Rodgers. If you go from Aaron Rodgers to Tua, let's just say because Miami has all this money to sign him, if you go from Aaron Rodgers to Tua, obviously not the same level of quarterback play. He's not going to put up the same numbers that he puts up in Green Bay anywhere else. And that's the only reason why I can't say he's a top five receiver because of who he's had as his quarterback. We don't know what he's going to do with mediocre quarterback play. We don't know what he's going to do with like a different quarterback. When Jordan Love started last year against Kansas City, Devontae Adams had 3 catches for, I think, for like 37 yards. That if he would go to Miami, that's what you might expect with for 5 years, 6 years. You don't know how he's going to do with somebody else. I still think he's worth like $20 million, kind of in the same range as Christian Kirk, but the money that he's asking, he's not worth because until you can see what he can do in a different system, and until you can see what he can do with a non-Hall of Fame quarterback, I can't consider him a top five wide receiver because of that reason. That's why I put DeAndre Hopkins as the best receiver in the NFL because look at what he has done and look at the quarterbacks he has had. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has always put up good numbers. Not the numbers that he put up last year, but Cooper Kupp put up good numbers with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is not a top 15 quarterback. And when you look at Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen might be a top five quarterback now, but Stephon Diggs is putting up great numbers in Minnesota with Case Keenum. Like, those are the receivers that I like to put in the top five consideration because of the numbers they put up and the quarterback play they have.
Yeah, and I can see your point with that. The issue is, I think we're both in agreement that Devontae Adams is probably better than Christian Kirk, right? I think in any system we'd agree.
Yeah.
And I think he says, I'm better than Christian Kirk, so I'm worth more than Christian Kirk. And I think that's the problem the Packers is going to face. I have him as a top 3 receiver in the NFL, and I just think that it's his ability to create separation on the line that sets him apart. I think his route running is absolutely terrific. But again, I can see your point of he's only played with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of players, when they leave that Hall of Fame quarterback, they're not the same. And same could be said about Devontae Adams. The problem for the Packers is
Devontae Adams is 30 now, I think?
29.
29. Greg Jennings was 29 when he left Green Bay.
Yep.
And his first year in Minnesota, he had 912 yards. His next year, he had like 860. And then he went to 700 and 500. Yeah. And Jennings was in his prime when he left Green Bay to go play with Minnesota. Adams is in his prime right now. If he leaves Aaron Rodgers, what numbers would he put up somewhere else that doesn't have a Hall of Fame type quarterback?
Yeah, and again, I can see your point. The issue is the Packers do have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and with the Packers, Devontae Adams plays in that type of level. And again, you can say it's Aaron Rodgers, you can say it's Devontae Adams. I would say that Devontae Adams sometimes does bail out Aaron Rodgers. A lot of times, Aaron Rodgers try to force balls into him. Mm-hmm. So the Packers are not going to get away with paying him only $20 million, right? They could have last year or 2 years ago, but they're not going to get away with it now just because of what Christian Kirk got and now what Chris Godwin got. I don't think Chris Godwin. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think Chris Godwin is $20 million worth. But in the system that he's in, they needed that receiver. They needed a receiver that knows what Brady likes, who has Brady's trust. Because we saw it. It takes time to develop trust with Brady. It's not easy to do so. And even though you signed Rashawn Gary, right? That was the Falcons receiver. Or who was the Falcons? They just signed the Falcons receiver. I can't think of his name. Started with a G.
Russell Gage.
What did you say?
Russell Gage.
I don't know why I said Rashawn Gary. Russell Gage, yes, Russell Gage. You signed Russell Gage, you're still going to need him to be your third. You're going to get Chris Godwin back in there. So I like the move in that sense to bring him back. You don't want to go through the same thing that Green Bay is going through. Again, is $20 million a little high for him? Yes, I would say so. I think he's more of a 15 to 17 kind of guy. But in that system, with that offense, with this team, you're going to need him to be back if you want to Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, this Devontae Adams thing is going to be a hot topic. And again, with every receiver that gets a contract, Devontae Adams is going to say, "I'm worth this much more than that guy. I'm this much more than that guy. Look at my numbers." And to Dustin's credit,
Wait till the dominoes fall on Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
who's
If
next?
Marquez Valdez-Scantling gets
Marcus
10 to
Valdez.
12 million, Devontae Adams is going to be like, he just got 12 million. He just got 12 million for dropping football. I am worth more than double that. So if he's getting 12 million, you better pay up right now or I'm not playing.
Yeah, and again, it looks to be the next domino to fall, and he's having talks from a lot of other teams. And again, if he, like you said, gets 12 million, Devontae Adams would sit here and tell you, I am double the player that he is. And I think probably most of us would agree that he's probably double the player he is. Maybe not contract wise, but he's double that player. So he's going to say, I want to get paid double that value. And the Packers now are in this kind of free agency bit of you tend to overpay in free agency, and that's what they're going to do. And to me, I want to ask you this question because I've been thinking about it. At this point, I know Devontae Adams hasn't signed, but would you go to Devontae Adams and say, hey, look, we're not going to be able to give you 25, but we're willing to work with you to find a trade partner? Would you go to him with that at that point?
Yeah, because I think the Packers are finally realizing if they don't give him 25, they're not going to get him.
Yeah.
So do you want to risk him not playing and pulling a Le'Veon Bell and then getting nothing for him? Or do you want to attempt to send him somewhere to at least get something back? And that's why the Raiders, to me, kind of fall into the most likely destination. He's already said that if he ever leaves the Packers, he'd want to play with Derek Carr again. Derek Carr is in Las Vegas. He played with him at Fresno State. He put up a lot of records together at Fresno State. It would be interesting to see how you guys would work together again. And the Raiders have the draft capital so we can give Green Bay back to make that trade happen. So obviously, if they're going to give up on a player like Adams, the Packers are going to want somebody in return. Plus, they're going to want draft capital. Darren Waller, to me, would be a name that you might see the Raiders to go to Green Bay, which would give the Packers that tight end they've been lacking for years. Plus, we get draft picks for Adam, if that's a possibility. The Packers would be foolish not to take it.
Yeah, and I think here we go for the Packers. If they do try to move him, what can you get now? Because I think other teams know, well, if he doesn't play for you, he doesn't play. If he doesn't play for us, he doesn't play for anybody. Unless you're giving him 25, and Devontae Adams is going to basically get to choose. Even though he doesn't have a no trade clause, he's not going to put pen to that franchise tag until they agree on a partner, until that trade is basically set in stone, and the only thing left to do is for him to sign. So the Packers, to me, are in a position where if you trade him to the Raiders, you might not get draft capital or you might not get Darren Waller. It's one or the other type of deal because, again, if that's the only place he wants to be, there's no bidding war. And if I'm the Raiders, do whatever you want to do, Green Bay, but he's not playing for you and he's only playing for us. So I think that's the real thing that could hurt Green Bay in this whole ordeal.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll come back in a little bit. There's still some more stuff we're going to go ahead and break down, but we're going to show you just a quick commercial.
Get ready. This summer, the Arena League Sports is on ASAP Network. Tune in live on either the Tiki Live or Roku app, as well as your smart home TV.
We are back. To make you feel that Arena League Football One comes out here on the ASAP Network. But we are back here, and we're talking about Devontae Adams, and we really don't know what his situation is going to be. And we kind of left off talking about how, if he gets traded, how much leverage do the Packers have? And it doesn't seem like they have much. Well, Deshaun Watson met with the Saints for a second time on Wednesday. He met with the Browns. And the report is he is very torn between the four teams that have made him pitches, those four teams being the Panthers, the Falcons, the Saints, and the Cleveland Browns. Dustin, I want to ask you, what is the most likely place he ends up, and what place do you think he would be the best in?
I would honestly cross Carolina off the list and Atlanta off the list because if you go to Carolina and Atlanta, who are you throwing to? Kyle Pitts is your option in Atlanta because Ridley's signed for you. You go to Carolina, you have DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, but you have Christian McCaffrey who can't stay healthy, so does that help you there? You go to Cleveland, you have Amari Cooper, because everybody else and their mother wanted out of Cleveland, so they were granted their wish and got out of Cleveland. At least if you go to New Orleans, you have guys like Marquez Callaway, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, but who knows what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara at this point. They still have Mark Ingram, who's proven to be a very valuable back for the Saints for many years before he took his talents to the Ravens and then came back. You have Taysom Hill, who you can use as a gadget player to do many different things. I think theoretically the best fit for him would be New Orleans just because they have a good defense and they have a lot more pieces to be competitive right away. But I think he realistically lands in Cleveland. And I think that does signal the end of Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, obviously. So then what do the Browns do with Baker Mayfield? Do they trade him somewhere? Do they just flat out release him and let him go wherever he wants? And I think that's kind of what domino effect's going to happen too. I think the best destination for him would be the Saints, but I see him ending up in Cleveland just because I think I don't know, for some reason you saw that message that Baker Mayfield sent out to the Cleveland fans after Cleveland met with the Watson.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't send something like that out unless the organization told you something, or you basically have a belief that your organization can choose Watson over him. Because let's just say Watson signs with New Orleans, Atlanta, or Carolina. Does Cleveland even want Baker Mayfield back at that point, knowing the tweet that he put out? That's the only reason why I think Watson ends up in Cleveland, just because after Mayfield said what he said, Cleveland kind of has to make a move, whether it's to move on from Baker, whether it's to move on from Watson. Well, if you're going to move on from Baker, you better hope to God you're bringing in somebody better, and obviously Watson's better.
Yeah, and I think Cleveland to me looks like a really good option for Deshaun, and it's because the line is still intact, the running game is still intact, and the defense is still kind of there. It's still kind of there. And Amari Cooper, yes, he's not D-Hop, he's not OBJ, he's not Jarvis Landry, but he's still in town. Jarvis Landry is said to be in talks with the Browns, and I'm with you on this. I don't know if Baker Mayfield puts out this statement, if someone doesn't tell him something or his agent doesn't say something to him, but something had to have been said. I don't like he's been quiet on this. And Andre gives up a point. What will Cleveland have to give up? And there's going to be draft capital, right? They're going to have to give up a couple.
Essentially, they would probably trade Mayfield to Houston as part of the deal.
Yeah, that would be one of the moves.
The thing with Mayfield, ever since he was drafted, he hasn't been a guy that's really spoken out about too many issues. He's kept it in-house, obviously with the Odell Beckham issues like coming to surface last year. He never really publicly expressed it. He talked about it in press conferences and just kind of how he handled the situation, but he never went out of his way publicly to discuss any of the issues that franchise had. So to see and hear him publicly go out with what he said after the Browns met with Watson, somebody had to have said something. Otherwise, he's not going to go out publicly with that kind of decision.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of the thing. The only thing I can think of where he did it publicly outside the press conference format was it Duke Johnson? I think probably talked about it yesterday, where he basically said you're either on the train or you're off. And Duke Johnson, replied to Baker Mayfield's thing a couple of days ago with I guess that was a train wreck, and that's so petty and funny at the same time. But look, I think Baker kind of sees the writing on the wall. Someone had to have told him something, and to me, that's why Cleveland's just jumping out at me. Because again, even though Deshaun says he's torn, I just can't imagine if you're Baker Mayfield, that kind of guy with that kind of pride and that kind of, thing of like, if I'm here, it's my team and I'm going to compete, and that kind of attitude to just kind of throw in the towel basically with him and say, look, I did everything I could. I've tried to be everything I can be, but it's just, it wasn't enough and it just didn't work out here. And I love you guys, but I'll see you later kind of message to Cleveland. Someone had to have said something.
And if you look at how the playoffs have gone the last couple of years, Cleveland came very close to beating Kansas City 2 years ago with Baker Mayfield. Yes, it took an injury to Patrick Mahomes to help, but with Baker Mayfield, Cleveland came very close to beating Kansas City. The year before that, Houston had Kansas City on the ropes. until Kansas City decided to enter video game mode and score 28 points in 4 minutes to take the lead. But who has the better roster out of those two teams?
Not Kansas City or Cleveland?
Out of Houston or Cleveland, like those two playoff games against Kansas City, who has the better roster, Cleveland or Houston?
Cleveland.
Who has the better quarterback?
Houston.
Put the better quarterback with the better roster. And your team is suddenly a contender because now you have that missing piece that they're going to
100%. I agree. And again, if I'm Cleveland, I'm doing everything I can to go and get Deshaun. And to Andre's point, what will you have to give up? Well, you're going to give up Baker Mayfield. He's going to be the Drew Lock of the trade kind of deal. You probably have to give up 3 first-round picks. And you give up
possibly Kareem Hunt because Nick Chubb is your primary back anyway.
Yeah, so you give up Kareem Hunt, and then maybe you have to give up a defensive piece. Maybe you have to give one guy up defensively. But I'm okay. I'm okay with that because, again, you put a good quarterback on a good team, you're going to be good. And he is, again, when he was on the field, he was a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And so if you are on that kind of level, you're going to have a good start. I'm just sorry about it. If you have a good quarterback, everything kind of works out for you. So if you're Cleveland, you are trying to make this push at Deshaun. I think we're both in agreement. It feels like Cleveland is the place Deshaun's going to end up just because of what Baker Mayfield said. He liked the pitch they have, and I think Cleveland's kind of desperate to go and get that franchise quarterback that they missed out on when they drafted Baker.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Whenever you hear players say things like that, there's writing on the wall because they don't just come out and say things like that without being told something, without being given advice, whether it's by your agent or whether it's by somebody else that if Watson wants in, he wants in, and you're pretty much done. So where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And right now in Cleveland, there's obviously a lot of smoke in that front office and in that building.
Yep, and again, whatever that situation comes down to, it's going to be a real tricky one for Cleveland and for Baker Mayfield. But if Deshaun ends up going to Cleveland, he's going to have to deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers just made a big-time move. They go get Myles Jack on a 2-year, $16 million deal. So now you couple Myles Jack alongside T.J. Watt with Brian Flores as your linebackers coach. And you actually have a quarterback who's kind of competent, can at least do something. It's not Mason Rudolph, and it's not Dwayne Haskins. It's Mitchell Trubisky. Did this Pittsburgh Steelers team, with that signing to you, Dustin, make themselves a contender for a wild card spot?
No, it made it a contender for the division.
Whoa.
They were 1 game behind Cincinnati last year. And that was with Ben Roethlisberger having one of his worst seasons because you could tell at 39 years old his arm had nothing left. That was with one of the worst running games in the NFL. Granted, Najee Harris had a good season, but he didn't have that great of a yards per carry average. And that was with a defense that thrived off of T.J. Watt, but a suspect secondary. They don't need a suspect secondary anymore because Myles Jack and T.J. Watt together are going to strike the fear of God into every quarterback that lines up on the other side because both of those guys can get 15 sacks. Then you still have Hayward in the middle stopping the run. The best way to improve a suspect secondary is to get pressure on the quarterback to force the quarterback to panic and throw up bad passes. Pittsburgh's going to force those quarterbacks to panic, and it's not going to be pretty. And Mitchell Trubisky, I believe in Trubisky. I always have in Chicago because as a starter, he was 28 and I think 18 or 28 and 19, something like that. He wasn't terrible as a starter. He was just never given the trust that he deserved. And now he's going to Pittsburgh where they've already committed to him over Mason Rudolph, who's been in that system for 5 years. Pittsburgh's going to trust him the next 2 years. He's got Chase Claypool. He's got DeAndre Johnson as his wide receiver. He's got Najee Harris in the backfield. They can bring back G.G. Smith-Schuster if they want to. Trubisky's got plenty of weapons. And he's going to have a defense that's very similar to the defense that he had in Chicago when you had Khalil Mack and all these guys wreaking havoc in the front seven, which allowed the secondary to force tons of turnovers. Pittsburgh, in my opinion, is designed very similar to that Bears team that Trubisky was on in 2018. And that Bears team went 12-4, won the NFC North, and if it wasn't for a missed field goal, who knows how the playoffs would have turned out for them. This Pittsburgh team has a chance to win the AFC North next year because of the way that defense is. And now you have a quarterback that's been in a system like this before.
And I was just about to go on that point. It's kind of similar to Chicago in the sense you're going to get after the quarterback. And this defense, it should carry this team. all Mitch Trubisky has to do, and what he's proven he can do, is kind of just not screw it up. Is say, hey, Najee, here's the ball. Hey, you want me to throw a slant? Okay, I'll throw the slant. He's not going to make ridiculous throws. He's not going to have that Mahomes or Josh Allen moment where he's just kind of flicking it off his back foot and it just lands perfectly 80 yards down the field. No, but he's also not going to have that Mason Rudolph moment where he throws it straight into 3 of the opposing team's players.
And then get beaten over the head with his own helmet.
Well, yeah, that could be said as well. But again, this team now, I don't know if they win the division, but they're going to be able to get after the quarterback. They're going to get after Lamar Jackson. They're going to get after Joe Burrow and whoever's in Cleveland. I still like the Bengals. I still like the way they're constructed. But yeah, they're gonna compete. There's no doubt about it. Myles Jack is just 26 years old. He started 82 of 86 games since entering the league in 2016. And his missed tackle percentage is 3.6, which was the second lowest of all inside linebackers to start 15 games last season. The way Jacksonville just cut this guy was just mind-boggling to me. The Steelers got a lot better. The quarterback situation got a lot better. And again, this team can make some noise because Mitch Trubisky's been in this type of situation where the defense carries and he's got to make a couple of big plays. I think we forget in that game against Philly in the playoff game, he led that drive and he made some pretty big throws in that drive to get them in the range, and then the double doink happened and we forget about everything else. He can make plays at times. To me, I never saw him as this guy who's going to be terrific, but he's going to be solid. And right now, the Steelers will take solid.
Well, our last point is now invalid, so we can just cross that out. But according to Adam Schefter, the Browns have been notified they are out of the Deshaun Watson match.
Well, there we go. Baker Mayfield, I don't know what you're talking about now, but
I don't know what you're going to do now either, Baker Mayfield, because...
And now if we want to jump back to Deshaun Watson, after saying that he is not going to go to Cleveland, New Orleans jumps out as the clear front runner to me because you free up all that cap room, right? You have $29.8 million or something like that now below the cap. You just had a second meeting with him, and now the news like this. He had the second meeting yesterday, and then he goes and informed Cleveland. Timing matters, and I think this is something to me that shows the Saints to be kind of the front runners in this thing. But the NFC South is getting themselves another top quarterback in the NFL because it's going to be one of those 3 teams.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, what do you think Sean Payton's thinking right now? Sean Payton left because of the salary cap situation they were stuck in, and because of the quarterback position. Now, if they get Watson, what do you think Sean Payton's thinking? But
if I'm Sean Payton and I see Deshaun Watson coming in and I see the salary cap what it is, oh yeah, come back, and for Sean, he can call some things he hasn't called in a long time. You talk about Drew Brees coming into the league, he was a little bit more athletic, but when he was in New Orleans, he never moved around. And for the past 3 years of his career, he couldn't really drive the ball down the field. They ran a lot of short underneath stuff. Now you get him with an uber talented, uber athletic quarterback in Deshaun Watson. He's going to call some things he hasn't called in a long time, and it is going to be fun to watch. If he gets down in New Orleans and Sean Payton gets down there, I'm sure Dennis Allen will be more than happy to go back to being the defensive coordinator. This could be something really special if he gets down to New Orleans.
Yep, but I'm just going to be devil's advocate, and I'm going to say he's going to land in Carolina to go play in North Carolina, where he's close to where he went to college in Clemson. And when Matt Rule failed miserably for a 3rd straight year, Watson's going to ask for Matt Rule to leave. Carolina's going to grab him as rich. They're going to ask him who he wants to be his next head coach. He's going to say Dabby Sweeney. And then he'll be like, we'll bring him in. And they're going to let Watson pretty much pick who he wants to be as head coach.
Do you think Dabble Sweeney would work in the NFL?
Yeah.
Really?
I do.
So why? Why? So we've seen a history of college coaches not really work out. You talk about, Nick Saban, Chip Kelly didn't work out in San Francisco. Urban Meyer, we'll forget about Urban Meyer. But we talk about Nick Saban, you talk about Chip Kelly. These guys really haven't made that successful transition. Matt Rule didn't even make a successful transition. Do you think they go back to college to go get Dabo Swinney?
Yes.
Why do you think he works?
You have to look at it from 2 different things. When Nick Saban tried it, he was at LSU. And he was a good coach at LSU, but not the level he's at. And he never had a run at LSU with what he's done at Alabama. So if he came back to the NFL now, I think he would be just fine because he's gone through this whole recruiting thing now where he's built the top recruiting class every single year, and he could use that to his advantage when he gets to free agency to basically do the same thing. You could say the same thing about Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was a great recruiter at Oregon, and when he got to Philadelphia, he had instant success the first couple of years. But he had success because he took the offense that he ran at Oregon and employed that with Michael Vick and the people that he had in Philadelphia. Once the league caught up to his offense, he wasn't able to adjust, which is why he had to go back to college. Matt Rule had no business being hired as a head coach in the NFL because he went to Temple, and you had moderate success at Temple. You didn't have great success. You had one good year at Temple. And for some reason, they think having success at Temple translates to having success in the NFL, which he gets to Carolina, you kind of drop the ball on that one. But Dabo Swinney, I think, would be just fine just because he's kind of in a similar situation to Saban where he has a top recruiting class every year, a top 2, top 3 recruiting class every year. He's got multiple national championships. Granted, the last couple of years haven't gotten planned, but he still has multiple national championships. He's been accustomed to building a top recruiting class the last decade. He's been accustomed to building a winning team, so he could use that to his advantage to build a championship caliber team through the draft, and then basically using the way he recruits as his free agent pitch.
And yeah, I don't mind that. I think Dabo Swinney would be an interesting pick to go down there in Carolina. Look, I don't know why they kept Matt Rule. I don't know why they hired Ben McAdoo. I'm sorry, you can say he's a good offensive coordinator. He fixed Eli Manning. No one fixed Eli Manning. He was
a good offensive coordinator who was a competent head coach, and newsflash, he was not a competent head coach.
Yeah, and again, I think that kind of trickles down. So again, Deshaun at Carolina to me makes a little bit more sense to some than other people. I was one defending it. If I don't know what you have to give up to go get him, but you talk about maybe give up.
You have to give up Sam Darnold, which Carolina would be more than happy.
They'd be more than happy to do so.
You'd probably have to give up Christian McCaffrey, which considering
they'd be more than happy to do so.
He has in his injury history, Carolina would probably grant that risk. They have a decent offensive line. They have a decent and young secondary.
Yes.
It makes sense for Carolina to do the move.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, it's because the last couple moves they made to improve that offensive line. That's what I think Deshaun Watson's looking at. Said they're willing to commit to the offensive line. That's been an issue for them. Like when Cam Newton was in Carolina, he never had an offensive line. It was never there, non-existent. Even though they could run the ball, the offensive line was never existent. So for them to fix the line, that is something that could definitely pull Deshaun there again. Being back in the Carolinas, that's the greatest place to be, North Carolina. There's no greater place. Maybe a little hometown cooking when I say that, but look, I think either one makes sense. I don't think Atlanta to me doesn't make a lot of sense because I just don't see the team in Atlanta. I don't see how they build that team in Atlanta. They're tied up in so much money elsewhere. They just gave Matt Ryan the extension. I don't see where it works in Atlanta. But I think Carolina and New Orleans, to me, we're back to basically where we were at the start of the week. At the start of the week, it was kind of Carolina or New Orleans. And then we saw Atlanta jump in, we saw Cleveland jump in, and now we've kind of seen those two teams fall out. And it's more about Carolina and New Orleans again. So, again, Deshaun Watson never lacks excitement, always making it interesting, whether he's on the field or in trade talks. So it should be another fun one when we talk about what Deshaun Watson is going through. Again, the NFL free agency period has been unbelievable. Yes, Damian, we just came through it. The Browns have been informed they are out of the Browns race. I think he meant to say the Deshaun Watson race.
Yeah.
And, is there anything, is there any move so far in free agency that you don't feel has been talked about enough?
Oh, boy. I think about a move that again.
Well, why you think, just real quick, the Steelers wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster has received virtual zero interest from teams so far in free agency. So the talks about the Chiefs going and getting him apparently is not looking very hot. It seems like Juju Smith-Schuster's market is worse in 2021's free agency than he could be very well back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we talk about bringing Juju back. It seems like that could be very true.
I guess I'm I'm not going to say the one move. I'm just going to talk about one team. I guess it's kind of really stood out that hasn't been talked about enough. I know you talked about it with Pride the other day, but just the move that the Chargers have made the whole offseason, extending Mike Williams to pair him with Keenan Allen for an additional 4 years to give Justin Herbert their top 2 targets. You go and add Khalil Mack, who might not be the same Khalil Mack that he once was, but you have him paired with Bosa now, so he could become the Khalil Mack of old because now you have to worry about Bosa and Mack, and you can't double team either one of them. And you add probably the game's best cornerback in J.C. Jackson to the secondary, and now he's going to be in charge of guarding Tyreek Hill. He's going to be in charge of guarding Jerry Jeudy and Hunter Renfrow and all the top receivers in the NFC West. So the Chargers, to me, have gone all in at this point. They know how. I would argue that they were the most talented team in the AFC West last year. If it wasn't for a lot of the mistakes Brandon Staley made as a first-year head coach, that was a team that was in the playoffs. And if you remember, back in early November, they were actually the number 1 seed in the AFC until they started to kind of falter late. And that's another team that nobody wanted to see come playoff team was the Chargers. You saw how tough the Chargers played the Chiefs both times. Won it the first time, and in my opinion, yes, the Chiefs won on the scoreboard, but Brandon Staley lost that game to the Chargers the second time. The Chargers didn't lose it. And if the Chargers win that second game, they win the AFC West. They make the playoffs in Kansas City, the wild card team. The Chargers were a team that no one wanted to see in the playoffs. Their defense was suspect. And now they address 2 big needs on their defense by adding J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack. So a team that nobody wanted to face last year, they're definitely not going to want to face them this year.
Yeah, I like the Chargers and what they've done. I think the team that hasn't got enough recognition is Cincinnati, though. You talk about bringing in Alex Kappa from Tampa Bay. You talk about bringing in Ted Karras, who plays all 5 offensive lineman positions, but truly is more of an interior lineman, center, guard, whatever you need. Look, this is a team that let Joe Burrow get sacked 50 times and hit 50 more times. You know, it's just something that you can't have, especially a guy coming off of a torn ACL. It's just not something you can work with. And again, no quarterback surviving taking 50 sacks for multiple years. And the fact that they went all in, yes, the draft, they went the sexy pick in Jamar Chase, but in free agency, we all said, you have to get linemen. And that's exactly what they did. They were in the market and they were ready to go get Ryan Jensen. But when Tom Brady came back, Jensen said, I'm getting the band back together and going down there. They did, I think, exactly what they needed to do. But speaking of guys who are available, we talked about how Juju Smith-Schuster has virtually 0 interest from other teams. Here's a guy that I think is going to create some interest, and it's Julio Jones. Yesterday was cut by the Tennessee Titans. Justin, give me a couple or just the team that you think is the best fit for him and the team you think is going to bring him in.
It's pains me to say because I love Julio Jones, but I don't think any team is a good fit at all. And it's because he can't stay healthy. He just can't. And I kind of put him in a similar situation as A.J. Green last year, where A.J. Green was great in Cincinnati his first 7 years. His last 3 years in Cincinnati, he was injury prone and couldn't stay on the field and had to settle for a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Cardinals where he played well, but what happened? He got hurt again. Julio Jones is the same thing. He was arguably a top 3 receiver, and maybe even the top receiver in the NFL for 5 years. But over his first 10 years in Atlanta, he was still a top 5 receiver. But his biggest bugaboo was he could not stay healthy. I think Atlanta got to the point where we're not going to pay you the money we're paying you if you can't stay on the field. Didn't get much of an interest on the open market last year. Ended up signing a 1-year deal with Tennessee, and what happened? Had the worst year of his career where it took him 14 weeks to get his first and only touchdown reception. I guess a large part of that is having Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, but Julio Jones is 6'5". You mean to tell me that Ryan Tannehill couldn't have thrown him a couple jump balls here and there when they're inside the 5-yard line when it's like 4th and goal or 3rd and goal? So, I mean, Jones had a terrible year last year. Healthy or not, even when healthy, he wasn't doing anything. I'm not going to say he's done in the NFL because he's only 32, going on 33, I believe. Yeah. But given his injury history, just given the production that he had in Tennessee, I don't know if there is a team that's a good fit for him. If I could pick one, I'm just going to say New England, just because they have receivers. They have Aguilar, they have Bourne, I believe, but they don't have
the dominant outside.
They don't need a top-notch receiver because of the system they play. But just adding Julio Jones, kind of that veteran presence for that younger receiving core, I think would help. And I think it would also help Mac Jones in the red zone because it gives him that jump ball red zone target. But outside of New England, I just don't see too many teams that are fit for him.
And I'm kind of on the similar side. I've seen people talk about the Raiders could use him. Again, is he going to stay healthy? I don't know. They do need number one, but I don't want to see him be in a position where he's going to be the guy that's targeted every single play because I just don't think his body can take it. India, another team that's being talked about. And if they had a quarterback, I think he'd go there. Washington, right, to go alongside Terry McLaurin, another team that's interesting. But as soon as I saw it, I said, and Damian Harris, you might like this or might not. He said, gosh darn it, Bulls, go get Juju. I was thinking about the Chicago Bears. I think if you need to surround Justin Fields with wide receiver talent. And I know Julio's not the Julio of old where he's going to be the number one receiver in the NFL. That's just not who he is anymore. But you talked about the red zone ball. You talked about when they're in there for jump ball situations. Who do the Browns have that can go one-on-one, contested, and make those types of plays? I like Darnell Mooney as a route runner, but he's your slot guy who can work the inside. And you haven't brought back Allen Robinson yet, so you don't have the guy who
they won't bring him back.
Exactly. So you don't really, to me, you don't have that weapon room. At least give him something to work with. And I think Julio Jones, he's gonna come cheap. Yes, he could get hurt, but at least I know when he's on the field, if I need someone to go win the jump ball, I can kind of have a guy who can go and win a one-on-one jump ball. I still think you go draft one. If you can get Chris Olave, that'd be terrific. I would still look and see if I can get another receiver in free agency. But to me, Julio Jones in Chicago, again, you get the jump ball opportunities. You create just that kind of when Justin Fields is rolling outside the pocket, you create just kind of a dump off guy he can just throw it up to when he's in trouble. And free up things for maybe Darnell Mooney, or maybe Darnell Mooney attracts attention and that frees things up for Julio Jones. One way or the other, I think it could really benefit a wide receiver room that really there's nothing there. I think this could be really good for Justin Fields and the Bears.
I like that move. I would take him in Minnesota too.
Right, and again, it's not going to be Julio of old, but I think any receiver right now in Chicago is better than what they have.
Yeah. I just don't know if he wants. He's 33. He's at the point of his career where he's going to want to go to a team that playoff.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that could be Green Bay, but they have no money to pay him. I mean, Green Bay fans are going to scream for him, but they have no money to pay him. Again, just to me, I think he's going to end up in a situation where they kind of need this one-on-one contested catch jump ball receiver. And that could be a multitude of places, but I feel it's going to be a team where they don't have that outside guy. They're looking for a guy to help out. And Chicago just kind of jumped right off the gate to me. I'm looking at, trying to think of teams in the playoffs. And you could talk about the Steelers if they want to go and get him. Sure. But again, I think that's the kind of situation he's going to be in. I don't think really he's going to be on a championship team. The Buccaneers don't need him. They don't need another outside guy. They need someone inside. Damian, that's the struggle for Bears fans, and he'll take any wide receiver at this point. I think Justin Fields will take any wide receiver at this point, too. I know he loves Darnell Mooney, but he can't just rely on him. And it's a shame to say that about Julio Jones, because I think up until really his last year in Atlanta and with the Titans, I thought he was the best receiver in the league. I thought he, made all these kinds of tremendous plays with no matter who was back there. I know Matt Ryan was his QB for a long time, but we don't hold Matt Ryan the same regard we hold guys like Aaron Rodgers. So I thought, I loved Julio Jones, and it hates me to say at 32, it's going to be hard for him to find a spot where he's going to truly be a guy that's going to be a contributing factor.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree.
Well, NFL free agency going crazy. We did have a couple of NBA games go on last night. Yesterday, we talked about the whole MVP thing, and I think everyone was kind of in agreement. It should be Nikola Jokic. And do you see what Nick Wright put out? He put out this MVP ladder, and it said Nikola Jokic at 5th. And I said, and Luka, I think, was number 1 on his MVP voting list. And I said, dog, do you watch basketball? Are we really talking about this?
I mean, Kansas City doesn't have a basketball team, so probably doesn't have
No, for real, man. That was just so annoying and surprised. I'm turning towards Pride, man. I'm like, man, I need to go and be on that Pride thing of if he doesn't win it, it's a robbery. If you don't win it unanimous, it's a robbery. Here we go. Damian Lillard's just released linebacker Joe Schobert.
Well, I mean, they got Miles Jack.
I think that's really what it came
They'd
down.
rather have Miles Jack than Joe Schobert. Not that he's saying Joe Schobert's a bad player, but he's not Miles Jack.
Yeah, Joe Schobert's great, but again, Joe Schobert's solid, but I'll take Miles Jack just because of how good he is. You look into the NBA, and we talked about the Lakers yesterday, and I'm just gonna say it. The Timberwolves were so disrespectful. Did you see any of the stuff that happened between the Timberwolves? Like, I didn't watch this game because I knew what was gonna happen, but my God, it was the most disrespectful game I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, I heard about it. I didn't see it was at work, but I heard about it. And now I think, at this point, I'm going to ask this to you because I know Freddie's probably listening. But at this point, if you're the Lakers, you pretty much just say epic and bench LeBron for the rest of the year.
Dude, if I'm LeBron, I'm trying to shut it down. Since I think the All-Star break, I read this at like they're 0-9, and they're 0-9 when LeBron doesn't score 50. They've only won when LeBron scores 50.
Yeah, like I'm at the point now where that even if they make the play in the tournament, they're not going anywhere, and LeBron's still under contract another year. So just basically scrap this season to pull a Golden State Warriors. Warriors knew that they didn't have Klay Thompson last year. Stephen Curry got hurt and was able to come back in February, but the Warriors were so bad at that point where they just said, you know what? We'll just use this as a mulligan. You're Curry, you can sit. Thompson, you can sit. We'll get a top 5 pick. We'll do what we need to do and fix everything. And now look at what they're doing this year. Lakers should do the same thing. Davis has been injured all year. Sit him the rest of the year. LeBron's been carrying that team, but he's been off and on injured. Sit him the rest of the year and just basically let Russell Westbrook run the show the rest of the year. Get a top 10 pick, draft somebody, and then just redo everything in the offseason.
I'm so with it. And, honestly, getting LeBron off the floor and shutting him down, I think would honestly make Westbrook a better player just because he won't have to worry about sharing the ball with another guy. You know what I mean? There's not going to be pressure if LeBron's on the floor. It's just Westbrook's team and let him just run it. Again, do the Lakers get a lot better? I don't know, but you maybe no, probably no. You don't get better, obviously. But dog, Russell Westbrook yesterday oh my God, I remember Patrick Beverley. He made this one defensive play and he's running back up the floor and he's just going to the Lakers bench. He's saying he's trash, holding his nose. Like it was unbelievable. He started flexing on LeBron. Russ shot a corner 3, which I don't know why they let him shoot a corner 3. Like, do they want him to hit the side of the backboard? He completely airballed the corner 3, and Karl-Anthony Towns caught it, and they called a timeout, and he starts looking around like, where did it come from? Like, this Lakers team is not good. LeBron is 37. If you sit LeBron, no one's going to say anything. No one is going to – the only person who might say something is the LeBron haters who's like, oh, look at this. He's giving up. No, he's not giving up. He's 37. Shut him down. Let Russell do his thing, and you're not going to win more games anyway. And then in the offseason, ship him somewhere like OKC or ship him anywhere where they don't need anything. Give him $100 to take on his contract and then get out of it and do something else in free agency. Go get Damian Lillard. But until then, you got to shut this whole thing down.
Yeah, and the thing with LeBron, too, this is the first time in his 18-year career that he's starting to show kind of crack in the arm. Like, there have been seasons where he's been injured, and there's been seasons where he's struggled, but he was still LeBron. And if you look at his numbers, obviously they're still LeBron numbers. But you can just look at his body, look at his face, and 37 is not aged well for him this year. And a lot of that, I think, is just the stress of just being as bad as that team has been.
Yep.
But I would say this is the first time in his NBA career where the year has not aged well for him. I mean, you can tell. He's just not – I'm not going to say he's not in it because he's never a guy that's going to quit. But I think he finally come to the realization after the first time in his career he can't save the team.
Yeah, and again, at 37, you're not expecting anybody to – at 37, not many players can save the team. Not in the NBA. It's really hard at 37 years of age, as physically dominant as he is. The Lakers, I'm the Lakers, I'm just shutting him down. I think LeBron is – I think he'd be more than willing now, just seeing what the state of this team is, to shut it down and just save it for next year. Because, to be honest, this team can still be salvaged. Is this team right now good? No. But it can be salvaged. You let go of Russell Westbrook. It opens up a lot more cap flexibility. And then you can bring in guys like Damian Lillard. You can get some more bench strength, and rebuild it. But you're going to need a healthy LeBron to make any of this work. And right now, if you keep playing him the way he's playing, he has to score 50. All the pressure's on him. At 37, it shouldn't be like this. So to me, shut it down. There is another Western Conference team I do want to talk about before we get out of here. Golden State yesterday, they lose to Boston. Let's go. Celtics, 110-88. But there is a caveat here. It's just a loss, right? It doesn't really matter. But Steph Curry went down late with a left foot injury late in the first half. And Marcus Smart was the thing behind the play. Do you think this really affects Golden State going forward? Now, the severity of the injury hasn't really come out. And again, if he's out for the year, obviously, but if he misses, say, the next half month, do you think it really hurts the Warriors' chances once they're in the playoffs?
Yes and no. Like I said yesterday, ultimately it comes down, and I don't think they can get it because of people back. But the one team that I said needed home field or home court was Golden State.
Yeah.
As long as they can at least get 2 rounds of being the home court advantage, they will be fine. And right now they are the 3 seed, so they need to get ahead of Memphis, which not having Curry is not going to make that any easier. But they still, in my opinion, are going to be fine to get to the playoffs because they have to worry about that. It's more so how are they going to play when they get to the playoffs, especially if they get that 3 seed. Because they will only have that home court advantage for the first round, barring a huge upset against Memphis in round 1, which I don't see happening. It's basically right now, depending on the severity of that injury, it's Draymond Green and Klay Thompson's turn to step up. And they're more than capable of stepping up. They're more than capable of keeping Golden State afloat. It's just been, I don't know, it's just been a weird year for Golden State. Like, they got off to such a hot start without Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson comes back and they're playing well, but then Draymond Green goes down and the team just plays terrible basketball for like 3 weeks stretch. They get those pieces back and now Curry goes down.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a toe injury, and it says to miss significant time, so the number isn't there. But I'm assuming that at least means half a month he'll probably be out. At least for the rest of March, he's going to be out, and it could lead into April. And I think we'll see him back in May. But
in my opinion, when they say significant, I'm not going to be shocked to see him done until the postseason. Really? I mean, they're not going to get the 1 seed.
Yeah.
I don't think they fall lower than the 3 seed because I think they have a 6-game cushion over the 4 seed.
Yeah. 4 games. I think it's 4-game cushion.
I think they're like 3 games behind Memphis right now. They're like 2 seeds.
They're 1 game behind Memphis, and they're 4 games ahead of Utah.
So realistically, they're going to have a top 4 seed regardless.
Right.
But the likelihood that they have a top 3 seed is pretty much set in stone. So if you don't need them, why use them until the playoffs? If you know that you're not going to get the 1 seed, and you know that you're not going to fall lower than the 3 seed, it doesn't matter if you get a 2 or a 3 seed at that point. Just get through the season healthy, get the seed you get, and then once the playoffs start, bring it back in.
No, I can see that absolutely. Again, if they could still win without him. I mean, Steph Curry is very important to what they like to do, but Jordan Poole has had a good year, and he can come in and kind of start for him if they needed him to. They can run things through Klay. They can do different options. And with the team healthier, with Draymond, with Klay, they can step up and they can make plays and make it completely happen. So the Warriors will be interesting. And I agree. I don't think they'll fall beyond the 4. They do take on the Mavs in the coming days. They take on the Spurs on Sunday, and then they'll take on the Magic on Tuesday. So we will see how they continue to fight through this stretch. The stretch doesn't seem to be terrible either. So we'll see what the Warriors are able to do. Justin, is there anything else that's really come up to you, or, because news is continuing to break, is there anything you've seen or anything you want to talk about real quick?
Nope, but today is officially the start of baseball. First spring training games happen today, so I'm actually very worried. Not from the point of another lockout happening, because that can't happen for 5 more years, thank God. But we saw what happened in 2020 during the COVID year, when spring training was underway and all of a sudden they shut it down for 3 months, and then they tried to do a condensed spring training to get that regular season going in July, and you saw all the injuries that happened. We are in a similar situation this year where you're going to have a 2-week spring training and then get right into the regular season. I'm worried more so about the health of these players right now, because if COVID was any indication of what can happen when you have a condensed spring training, What's going to happen now knowing that you have 162 games as opposed to 60? How many players are going to get hurt? How many players are going to just... And I'm going to use Carlos Correa as a student. I think I brought it up yesterday. Is this going to be a situation where Carlos Correa just might take the year off? Because if you look at all these free agents that are signing right now, like Sia Suzuki, who went to the Cubs, Schwarber, Bryant, all these people that signed the last couple of days with the exception of Anthony Rizzo, there's no way they're going to be in camp. They might get to camp today, but there's no way they're going to be ready to go today for their first spring training game. And chances are they're not going to be ready to go for a week. So instead of getting 16, 17 spring training games in, a lot of these players are going to be lucky to get 7 spring training games in before the regular season starts. Then once the regular season starts, you're looking at probably 20 to 25 games to finally get your rhythm down. That's why spring training is 30 games. It takes players typically 2 to 3 weeks to get into their rhythm, and then usually that last week of spring is kind of when you see like everyone get their timing down. Their pitchers are starting to go 5, 6 innings. Hitters are starting to get 3 at bats as opposed to 1 or 2. A lot of these players are going to take a month, maybe a month and a half to get into rhythm. The starting pitchers, you're not going to see any team have a starter go more than 5 innings, I don't think, it's already MMA. Because they're not going to be able to, because they haven't had the month of spring training right now. It's going to be just one of those situations where if Correa signs with anybody, when is he actually going to have a chance to like, get in his rhythm? When is he going to have a chance to get on the field? Does he want to risk getting hurt if he signs a 1-year deal and then screwing himself in free agency next year? Or does he just want to sit, sign a big contract next year and worry about it then?
Yeah, all questions that are going to be broken down through as we come in through the next couple of weeks. Iverson, thank you for this. Warriors star Stephen Curry has been diagnosed with a sprained ligament in his left foot and will be sidelined, and that will sideline him indefinitely. So the X-ray foot on the foot returned negative. So negative is good, right? You want it to return negative, or is it the other way around?
Oh, negative is good for ligaments. That means there's no like surgery required.
Okay,
it's kind of one of those things where you have to rest it, and when you feel like you can play on it, you can play on it. But it is a ligament, so it can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on how it is.
Yeah, well, words are hard and the meanings are different, so that always confuses me. Dustin, thank you so much for joining me on the morning show. We have the skeleton crew out here today, but a lot of fun. Always good.
Let's get a stat of the day since I haven't done that lately.
Oh yeah, let's get it. Let's get a stat of the day. I missed stats of the day.
So Chase Daniel has to be considered the NFL god at this point. Even though he did not throw a single pass last year, he's got 1 year left on his contract with the Chargers as the backup for Justin Herbert. If he does not throw a single pass this year and decides to retire at the end of this year, he will go down as a top 5 quarterback in terms of annual earnings per pass attempt, as he earned $1,583 per pass attempt.
Oh my God. Well, how about that first stat of the day? If that doesn't get you amped up, that doesn't get you excited to be a backup quarterback in the NFL, I don't know what will. Dustin, thank you so much. We thank all of you guys for tuning in, for commenting. Make sure you check us out tomorrow, same time. Make sure you check out plenty of the other ASAP shows. And until tomorrow, for Dustin, for myself, we will see you later.
Whole sports, all plays. Yeah. Whole sports, all plays. Whole sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. Great eye in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.